Hey guys, tonight we drift down a slow amber river, the Nile. The surface glimmers like brushed bronze in the last light of day. The air hums with warmth, the faint buzz of insects, the creak of wooden boats swaying against their moorings. In the distance, a heron lifts lazily from the reeds, its reflection rippling across the water. You can almost feel the soft weight of the evening pressing against your eyelids already. You're about to explore one of humanity's quietest revolutions, how something as simple as a swamp reed became the world's first great writing surface. You probably won't survive this journey, not because of danger, but because you'll likely fall asleep halfway through it, lulled by the murmur of the Nile and the whisper of history itself. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're at it, drop a comment with your location and the local time. I love seeing how far these sleepy stories travel. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You stand at the edge of the Nile Delta, watching the wind move through the papyrus plants like slow waves of green silk. Each stalk towers taller than you, strong yet flexible, crowned with a tuft of delicate, feathery fronds that sway like little fireworks. This is Cyperus papyrus, a plant so ordinary that most animals ignore it, yet so extraordinary that entire civilizations leaned on its fibers. The Egyptians called the plant waj, meaning fresh or green. But to us, it's papyrus, the ancestor of paper, the quiet backbone of history. Without it, there would be no scrolls, no libraries, no dusty archives whispering stories across millennia. The Nile itself seems to breathe life into these reeds. Every year it floods its banks, spreading dark, fertile silt across the marshes. The papyrus thrives here, where land and water mingle in that thin, glistening line between river and desert. You can almost hear the squish beneath your sandals as you step closer. The locals know the reed's every secret. They've used it for boats, sandals, mats, baskets, even food. The white pith inside is edible, sweet, a little like celery, if you can imagine biting into a vegetable that could one day hold a poem. It's one of those quiet facts that historians love to remind us of. The first pages of human literature started as lunch. The plant isn't just useful, it's sacred. The god Thoth, patron of wisdom and writing, is often shown holding a papyrus stem, while Seshat, the goddess of record-keeping, wears a stylized papyrus blossom in her crown. To write was to bring order to the universe, to measure the heavens, to count the grains of time itself. And to do that, you needed something to write on. Historians still argue whether papyrus was discovered accidentally, maybe someone noticed that flattened reeds stuck together after drying in the sun, or if it was deliberately engineered by early scribes. Either way, its invention transformed Egypt from a place of fleeting words to a keeper of memory. The river that gave life to the crops also gave life to thought. As you drift downstream, you pass small villages huddled against the bank. Children splash in the shallows, laughter echoing across the water. Behind them, tall bundles of freshly cut papyrus lean against mud brick walls, drying under the late afternoon sun. The smell in the air is sharp and green, like wet grass after rain. You can picture a craftsman crouched by the river, knife in hand, slicing a stalk at its base. He peels away the tough outer rind to reveal the pale inner pith, long and spongy. When cut into thin strips, these will one day become a sheet of papyrus, the first canvas of civilization. But not yet. For now, the reeds rest. Their sap glistens faintly in the heat. You can almost hear them sigh, as if they know their destiny lies not in the swamp, but in the scrolls of kings. One mainstream historical fact: papyrus was used in Egypt as early as 3000 BCE, long before the Great Pyramid was even dreamed up. Imagine that. Before pharaohs carved their names into stone, scribes were already pressing soft plant fibers into smooth, writable sheets. A quirky tidbit? The papyrus plant grows so abundantly that it once clogged the Nile like green traffic. Some historians joke that half of Egypt's engineering genius was just figuring out how to get boats through the stuff. It's said that travelers complained their oars got tangled in the reeds, and fishermen cursed them for scaring away the fish. Still, no one thought of getting rid of papyrus entirely. Too valuable, too sacred, too full of potential. You watch as the sun dips lower. The sky over the Nile turns a faded copper, and the reeds become silhouettes, black brushstrokes against the gold. The air cools. Insects grow louder, and a faint mist begins to curl above the water. The scene is so tranquil, it's easy to forget that every empire that ever conquered Egypt, from the Persians to the Greeks to the Romans, did so partly to control this simple, magical resource. Whoever owned the papyrus trade owned the means to write history, literally. There's a rhythm to this river, an unhurried heartbeat that syncs with your own. The slow slap of water against the boat's hull, the gentle rustle of reeds, the occasional croak of a frog who, frankly, sounds like he's had a long day. You can almost imagine the ancient scribes drawing inspiration from this music, the Nile's own lullaby, while recording harvests, prayers, and gossip in delicate lines of ink. You close your eyes for a moment and picture a scribe sitting cross-legged on a low stool, a roll of fresh papyrus before him. The fibers gleam faintly in the candlelight. His hand hovers over it with a reed pen, black ink glistening at the tip. What he's about to write could be a tax record, a hymn, or a love letter. Whatever it is, it will outlast him, outlast his children, and maybe even outlast the sandstorms that bury whole cities. Papyrus is memory in plant form, a living archive turned silent parchment. It holds whispers of ancient bookkeeping and cosmic myths in the same patient fibers. It doesn't shout like stone or bronze, it simply endures. As the night deepens, your boat drifts further into the heart of the Nile's green labyrinth. You can almost feel yourself slowing, your thoughts softening, like reeds bending under a light breeze. Tomorrow, you'll wade into the marsh to see how these stalks are harvested, stripped, and transformed. But for now, just listen. To the river, to the rustle, to the story that began with a plant and ended with civilization learning to remember. The stars appear one by one, scattered like tiny ink drops on a page of black sky. Somewhere in the distance, a scribe dips his pen. A child falls asleep to the hum of crickets, and the papyrus sways on the banks, whispering secrets to the night. Morning comes slowly to the Nile. The mist lifts in lazy curls, and the first rays of sunlight spill across the marshland like a golden flood. You stretch, if only in your imagination, and watch as the papyrus stalks sway gently, each one catching light on its thin green skin. The water glimmers between them, cool and silent. It's another day in ancient Egypt, and somewhere nearby, a group of workers is already trudging into the wetlands, bare feet sinking softly into the mud, knives gleaming at their sides. You follow them, the air thick with the smell of river and plant sap. It's not unpleasant, more like the earthy scent of freshly cut vegetables after rain. The workers move methodically, bending and slicing, stacking the reeds into neat bundles. You notice how careful they are. The papyrus may grow wild, but its harvest is an art. Cut too low and you risk damaging the root system. Cut too high and the fibers lose strength. It's a balance learned through generations, passed down quietly from father to son, mother to daughter. The reeds squeak faintly as they're gathered together. You reach out, run your fingers along one, and feel the slick outer skin. tough, fibrous, almost waxy. Inside, though, you know there's something very different. The soft white pith that makes papyrus so special. You imagine slicing through the stem, watching it reveal its pale heart, like opening a secret. As you walk, you notice the variety of uses these people find for their harvest. Not every stalk is destined to become a writing surface. Some are destined for boats, woven into sleek, buoyant holes that skim the shallow waters of the Nile. Others will be turned into mats, sandals, baskets, even rope. The papyrus plant is the Swiss army knife of the ancient world, useful in almost every way. Papyrus boats, sometimes called skiffs, were a staple of daily life in Egypt. Archaeologists have found depictions of them painted on tomb walls as far back as 2500 BCE. They were light, fast, and easy to repair, a perfect choice for fishing or crossing the calm waters near the delta. The great irony, of course, is that the same plant used to transport messages across the Nile also carried the messengers themselves. You hear a splash as one of the workers drops a bundle into the water. The reeds float effortlessly, proof of their inner air channels that make them both strong and weightless. The man grins, balancing his next armload on his head. His tunic clings damply to his skin, streaked with silt. You get the sense he's done this 1,000 times before, and will do it 1,000 more. As the sun climbs higher, the marsh hums with life. Frogs croak from the shadows, ibis wade with mechanical patience, and dragonflies zip through shafts of sunlight like tiny sparks. Somewhere nearby, a woman hums softly as she strips the outer layers from a stalk. Her knife flashes, the motion rhythmic and slow, almost meditative. You step closer to watch. She slices the papyrus at an angle, then splits it lengthwise with practiced ease. The inner pith is glistening, pale as ivory. She lays the strips in a pile beside her, their ends curling slightly as they dry in the warmth. This is the first step in turning plant into page. But it's also part of something bigger, a ritual of transformation, where nature becomes culture, where waterborne reeds become vessels for words. Historians still argue whether papyrus production was centralized, controlled by the state and temple workshops, or if it remained a cottage industry in villages like this one. Some evidence suggests the royal court tightly regulated papyrus exports, guarding the process like a trade secret. Others believe local artisans produced it freely, trading their sheets at bustling river markets. Either way, it's clear that papyrus was both commodity and art, as essential to Egyptian life as grain or linen. You pause to watch as a boy helps tie the finished bundles together. He uses thin strips of dried papyrus as twine, nothing wasted here. The bundles will be carried back to the village for soaking, slicing, and pressing, but that's for later. For now, the air smells of sun-warmed vegetation, and the day stretches lazily ahead. The boy looks up and smiles at you, as if sharing a secret. You imagine he's thinking about how this reed, soft and ordinary now, might one day bear the handwriting of a pharaoh or the poetry of a priest. He doesn't know his name will never appear in the scrolls he helps create, but maybe that's the beauty of it. Papyrus holds countless anonymous hands within its fibers. A quirky tidbit? Ancient Egyptians sometimes ate roasted papyrus roots as a delicacy. Herodotus, ever the curious Greek tourist, wrote that the locals would chew the raw pith, while the upper classes enjoyed it cooked and seasoned. So yes, your future notebook may have once been someone's dinner. Try not to think about that next time you write a grocery list. You watch the workers take a break, sitting in the shade of a cluster of palms. Someone passes around a jug of cool river water. Another fans himself with a papyrus frond. The laughter drifts through the reeds, lazy and good-natured. It's strange, isn't it, how something so crucial to civilization is born from moments so ordinary. The smell of mud, the glint of sunlight, the rhythm of knives in the marsh. The scene could almost lull you to sleep right now. The soft slosh of water, the chirp of birds, the occasional sigh of wind through the reeds. You can see how the ancient Egyptians came to associate this plant with life itself. The hieroglyph for Lower Egypt was a papyrus stalk. The very word for writing, dima, echoed the sound of slicing reeds. It's as if language itself grew from the swamp. You imagine yourself joining the workers, helping to lift a heavy bundle of stalks. The reeds are cool against your skin, dripping faintly. As you walk back toward the village, your feet leave shallow prints in the mud that quickly fill with water, erased almost instantly, just like unrecorded memory. You think of all the generations who did this work before, nameless and forgotten, yet whose hands literally built the pages of history. The boat ride back is slow. The papyrus bundles are stacked neatly in the hull, rustling softly as the boat rocks. The river glides beneath you, opaque and brown-green. Every now and then, a fish breaks the surface with a quiet splash, sending out ripples that shimmer like liquid glass. You find yourself dozing in the gentle motion. The workers murmur quietly, half asleep themselves. One of them hums a tune, a low, repetitive melody that sounds older than memory. It might have been sung by their grandparents, or maybe by workers thousands of years earlier. You can't tell. It blurs into the sound of the water, the creak of the boat, the rhythmic slap of oars. By the time you reach the shore, the sun is beginning to sink again. The bundles are unloaded and stacked near a row of simple huts, ready for the next stage of their transformation. The air smells faintly sweet, like sugarcane left too long in the sun. You can almost feel the day's warmth fading into your skin. Tomorrow, these reeds will be sliced thinner still, soaked until supple, and pressed into something that can hold ink. But for now, the papyrus rests, drying under the endless Egyptian sky. You watch the horizon fade to amber, the first stars appearing like tiny blinking eyes. Somewhere nearby, a scribe is already grinding soot into ink, preparing for the pages that haven't yet been born. The river hums softly, patient as ever. You breathe in the quiet, and for a moment you feel suspended, half in the past, half in a dream, listening to the murmur of a civilization built on reeds. The next morning, the sun arrives without hurry, gliding over the horizon in a thin shimmer of gold. The Nile is already awake, boats creaking, birds calling, and somewhere in the village, a quiet clatter of tools. Today, you'll see the next step in the papyrus's transformation, how these bundles of green reeds turn into smooth, golden sheets ready to hold 1,000 years of memory. The air smells faintly of damp fiber and smoke. Outside one of the huts, a woman crouches beside a clay basin filled with water. She takes a stalk of papyrus and, with a practiced hand, peels away the tough outer rind to reveal the tender, ivory-colored core. Each strip curls as it's sliced like a ribbon of sugar. She lays them out in the basin where they float for a few hours, or sometimes overnight, until they soften enough to press flat. You watch as sunlight glints off the water, catching the faint, milky sap that seeps from the plant. That sap, rich in natural sugars, is the secret to papyrus's strength. When the softened strips are pressed together, those sugars act like glue, binding the fibers into a single, sturdy sheet. The Egyptians didn't need chemical adhesives or fancy formulas, just time, pressure, and patience. The traditional method of papyrus making, described by the Roman author Pliny the Elder in the 1st century CE, involved 2 perpendicular layers of pith strips, one horizontal, one vertical, moistened and pressed under heavy weight. Once dried in the sun, the surface was polished with a stone or shell, creating that silky finish still visible on surviving fragments thousands of years later. The woman beside the basin hums softly, her tune blending with the rustle of palm leaves above. Nearby, her son tends a wooden frame where sheets of papyrus are being pressed between linen cloths. He tightens the bindings, water seeping out in small rivulets. The whole scene feels timeless, simple, efficient, peaceful. You reach out and run your fingers along a drying sheet. It's light and smooth, but not fragile, more like thin cardboard than paper. When the sun hits it just right, you can see faint lines where the layers cross, like the weave of fabric. Each sheet bears its own subtle fingerprint of texture and shade, a little uneven, a little human. A breeze lifts the edge of one sheet, and for a moment it flutters like a golden leaf. You can almost imagine words already ghosting across it, the faint whisper of ink yet to come. The villagers know every detail of this process by heart. They can tell when a sheet has dried enough just by touch. Too wet and it warps, too dry and it cracks. Some prefer to polish their papyrus with ivory or seashells, others with smooth river stones. It's an art of patience, of waiting for the sun to do its quiet work. You pause to imagine the scene centuries later in bustling markets of Thebes or Memphis, where stacks of finished papyrus sheets are traded for grain, copper, or oil. The sheets are bundled by size and grade, royal, fine, middle, or common. The best ones are smooth as silk, fit for temple decrees and royal correspondence. The cheaper grades might end up as wrapping paper, or even reused for accounting and notes. Not every page gets to hold poetry, after all. Historians still argue whether the papyrus trade was fully monopolized by the royal bureaucracy or loosely managed by guilds of artisans. Some scrolls bear faint workshop marks, tiny hieratic notations suggesting local production. Others show consistency that hints at strict oversight. Either way, papyrus wasn't just a craft, it was an economy. Egypt's paper industry supplied the Mediterranean world for centuries. You might say the Nile exported not just goods, but memory itself. Some ancient scrolls were found to have been made from recycled papyrus. Old documents, scraped, washed, and reused. The faint traces of original writing still visible beneath the newer text. Imagine unrolling a letter and realizing your grocery list is scribbled over an ancient tax decree. It's the original version of "Don't waste good paper." As the day warms, you watch the craftspeople spread fresh sheets across flat stones to dry in the sun. The smell is clean, almost sweet, with a faint vegetal tang. Bees hover lazily nearby, drawn by the sticky sap. The sheets gleam pale gold in the light, like tiny mirrors of the sun itself. One of the men holds a finished sheet to the sky and squints. He runs his hand across it, nods in approval, then stacks it carefully on a growing pile. He doesn't know it, but his handiwork will travel far beyond this village, perhaps to a temple archive, perhaps to a scholar's table in faraway Alexandria. Or perhaps it will crumble into dust before it's ever used, reminding us how fragile the chain of memory can be. You can almost hear the unspoken dialogue between human and nature here. The way the plant yields itself to purpose, the way hands coax it into something more enduring than flesh or bone. The reed that once bent in the river breeze now waits patiently to hold a story. The rhythmic sound of scraping fills the air. A young apprentice is polishing a sheet with a smooth shell, circular motions slow and even. Each pass makes the surface a little shinier, a little smoother. You imagine the whisper of his movements, the soft rasp against the grain. It's strangely hypnotic, like the world itself is being buffed into clarity. He pauses to wipe his brow, leaving a faint streak of dust. You notice the way his hands tremble, not from exhaustion, but from focus. It's a kind of reverence. After all, these sheets will outlive him. The fibers he smooths today may carry the decrees of kings, the hymns to gods, the maps of stars. He doesn't need to know the words. He just builds the surface for them to exist. A breeze stirs, and you look toward the river. The papyrus fields sway like a green sea. their feathery tops shimmering in the light. You think about how many thousands of stalks it must take to fill a single library, how each reed carries within it the potential for wisdom, myth, and mischief. Somewhere, a future scribe will complain about papyrus prices. Some things never change. You sit down on a low stone and close your eyes for a moment. The soundscape is soft but vivid. The rustle of drying sheets, the splash of water being poured, the creak of the press tightening, the low hum of conversation. It's a world of texture and patience, of work that feels both practical and sacred. You open your eyes again and notice something you hadn't before. The faint glimmer of fibers catching sunlight like threads of gold. Each sheet is imperfect, irregular, and somehow more beautiful for it. It's as if the sun itself has signed its name across the surface. The day drifts by slowly, like the river outside. When evening comes, the last of the sheets are gathered, stacked, and tied with thin twine. The workers stretch their backs, their hands sticky with sap and dust. Someone jokes about how the gods must have invented papyrus just so scribes could complain about paperwork. The others laugh softly, the sound carried on the warm wind. The final rays of sunlight slip behind the hills, bathing the village in a soft amber glow. The air cools, and a faint mist begins to rise again from the marsh. You take one last look at the drying racks, rows of golden sheets glowing in the twilight, and realize you're witnessing the birth of writing's first home. The papyrus no longer looks like a plant. It looks like possibility. It looks like thought made visible, ready to capture everything from prayers to grocery tallies to the occasional dramatic breakup letter. Let's be honest, those existed too. As night falls, the villagers head home, their laughter fading into the hum of crickets. You linger a little longer, feeling the warmth still radiating from the pressed sheets. The air smells faintly sweet and dusty, like summer memories. You imagine what it would be like to hold one of these sheets centuries later, to trace its faint fibers and feel the echo of the Nile in your fingertips. Tomorrow, the ink will flow, the lifeblood of every story ever told. But tonight, you rest beside the golden paper that was once a green reed, letting its quiet endurance lull you into calm. The next day dawns with the soft smell of smoke and resin drifting on the wind. Somewhere nearby, someone is grinding something, a low, rhythmic sound like a pestle in a mortar. You follow it, drawn past the drying racks of golden papyrus sheets, until you find a small, shaded courtyard where the real alchemy happens. This is where the words begin, the place where the quiet fibers of the Nile meet the dark, gleaming soul of ink. A scribe sits cross-legged on a reed mat, a short wooden table before him. Beside him are bowls and jars, each holding some mysterious mixture of powder, gum, and soot. His hands move slowly, with the care of someone performing a sacred ritual. You crouch nearby and watch. He picks up a lump of something black and crumbly, charred remains from a cooking fire, or perhaps from the burned ends of oil lamps. It's pure carbon, the essence of soot. He crushes it between his fingers, then pours it into a small stone bowl. Next, he adds a little gum arabic, the sticky sap from acacia trees. A few drops of water, a gentle stir, and suddenly the blackness blooms like ink spilling across time. Ancient Egyptian ink was almost always made from soot mixed with water and gum arabic. The soot gave it that deep, velvety black, while the gum bound it to the papyrus. Sometimes, scribes added a hint of beeswax or vinegar to adjust the texture. Later, colored inks emerged, red from iron oxide, green from malachite, blue from azurite. But black remained the favorite, the color of permanence. The scribe dips a slender reed pen into the mixture. It's nothing more than a split stalk,
trimmed to a sharp point and softened at the end. He tests it on a scrap of papyrus, and the lines flow smoothly, thin and dark, with a faint shine when the light hits it. You lean closer and watch as he writes. His wrist barely moves. It's his fingers doing the work, precise and rhythmic. You can hear the faint scratching of the reed against the papyrus, a whispery sound like the brushing of wings. It's strangely soothing, this delicate conversation between ink and fiber. The smell in the air is earthy and faintly sweet, a blend of soot, gum, and sunlight on paper. The scribe pauses every few moments to stir the ink, keeping it from thickening. He works with the patience of someone who knows the Nile doesn't rush, and neither should he. A quirky tidbit: some ancient scribes flavored their ink water with wine or even beer, not to make it smell better, though that was a perk, but because the alcohol helped the pigment dry faster. So, in a sense, a few Egyptian manuscripts were written under the influence, just in the most literal way possible. Around the courtyard, apprentices move quietly, grinding more soot, washing brushes, trimming fresh pens. The atmosphere is half workshop, half temple. Writing wasn't just a job here, it was sacred labor. To record was to preserve, and to preserve was to defy time. The scribe finishes a line and sits back, admiring his work. The hieroglyphs gleam faintly in the sunlight, each one carved not in stone, but painted in liquid shadow. You recognize some shapes: the eye, the bird, the ripple of water. They look alive, like they might flutter off the page if you stare too long. He blows gently on the ink to dry it, and for a moment it feels as though he's breathing life into the words themselves. Historians still argue whether Egyptian inks were truly waterproof. Some claim they were surprisingly resistant to smudging thanks to the gum binder. Others think the dry desert air simply did all the work. Either way, it's remarkable that so many papyrus scrolls, buried for thousands of years, still hold legible ink, black lines as sharp as the day they were written. The ancients may not have had printing presses, but they mastered permanence. You take a seat beside a young apprentice who grins shyly before returning to his task. He's sharpening the tip of a reed pen with a small copper knife. The shavings fall like golden slivers onto the mat. Every few minutes he tests the nib, adjusting the angle until it feels just right. It's oddly similar to how modern artists fuss over their brushes or stylus settings. Some things never change, even over 4,000 years. He gestures for you to try. You pick up a reed pen, dip it gently into the ink, and make your first mark on papyrus. The line is too thick, the angle wrong. The apprentice chuckles softly. You try again, and this time the line flows smoother, cleaner. You realize how delicate the balance is. Too much pressure and the reed splays. Too little and the ink won't flow. Writing here isn't just communication, it's choreography. The scribe looks up, smiling faintly. The pen must dance, he says. His voice is calm, melodic. You nod, though your hand still trembles slightly. Outside, the day hums on. The scent of bread baking drifts in from a nearby hearth, mingling with the sweet, smoky air of ink. You hear the call of traders by the river, the splash of oars, the far-off cry of a heron. Life continues, while inside this small courtyard, words take shape, one brushstroke at a time. You look down again at the papyrus and feel a strange tenderness toward it. Just yesterday, these fibers were reeds swaying in the river wind. Now they hold thought. You can still see faint grooves where the strips overlap, the slight texture beneath the ink. Each sheet has its own personality, some softer, some coarser, some more willing to absorb the pigment than others. The scribe adjusts to each like a musician tuning an instrument. He pauses to add a final flourish, a curved line at the end of a column. The ink catches the light, drying from glossy to matte. Then he leans back and stretches, his joints popping softly.
Nearby, an apprentice stirs a bowl of red pigment. The powder glows like crushed sunset. He mixes it with gum and water, creating the sacred ink used for headings, names of gods, and the beginnings of new sections. Black for the body, red for the soul. The contrast is mesmerizing, life and order on the same page. The scribe begins again, now alternating black and red in steady rhythm. You can sense the centuries of habit behind every motion, every pause. It's the physical embodiment of patience. You find yourself drifting into a slower rhythm too, breathing in time with the scratch of pen and the rustle of papyrus. The workshop's sounds merge into a gentle hum, scraping, grinding, tapping, murmuring. It feels like the heartbeat of civilization itself. A faint breeze slips through the courtyard, carrying a bit of soot into the sunlight. It dances there for a moment, tiny motes of history suspended in gold, before settling on the drying sheets. You wonder if those specks might one day end up inside a royal decree or a love poem. Every grain, every mark, a piece of eternity. The day grows long. The apprentices finish their chores, the ink bowls are covered, and the tools are cleaned and set aside. The scribe places his finished sheets on a low shelf to dry completely, their edges curling slightly as they harden. The air smells of earth and time. As evening falls, he unrolls a fresh piece of papyrus, holds it up to the fading light, and smiles. "Tomorrow," he murmurs, almost to himself. You stand, stretching, and glance once more at the black ink glimmering in the last sunbeam. Somewhere in those dark lines lies a story, one that might survive sandstorms, dynasties, and centuries. You take a deep breath, the scent of smoke and sap clinging to your memory, and step back into the warm dusk. The Nile glows bronze under the setting sun. Somewhere, reeds still whisper in the shallows, their reflections trembling on the surface. The river carries everything: silt, fish, boats, dreams, and now words. You follow its sound, the slow rhythm of water meeting shore, and let it lull you into calm. Tomorrow, the scribes will prepare their scrolls, rolling, gluing, joining. But tonight, you let the scent of fresh ink and the hum of distant voices pull you toward sleep. The story of writing has begun to breathe. The sun rises softly over the city once more, casting long golden shafts of light through latticed windows. The scent of morning, the Nile, fresh bread, and faint ink lingers in the still air. Today, the scribe's workshop hums quietly, not with the clatter of ink bowls or the chatter of apprentices, but with the delicate rustle of papyrus being assembled into scrolls. This is the next chapter in the story of Egyptian writing, the birth of the scroll. You step inside the shaded room and see several workers seated on low stools, each holding sheets of papyrus that glimmer faintly in the morning light. They work in pairs, faces calm and focused, movements precise. The task looks simple, joining sheets together, but there's art hidden in every step. Each papyrus sheet is about as long as a man's arm, and they must be glued edge to edge in perfect alignment. Too much overlap, and the scroll will bulge. Too little, and it will tear with time. The artisans begin by lightly dampening the ends of each sheet, then brushing on a thin layer of paste, made from flour, water, and sometimes the sap of lotus stems. The paste has a faintly sweet smell, earthy and soft. When two sheets are pressed together, they overlap just enough that the vertical fibers of one rest atop the horizontal fibers of the other. The pressure fuses them gently, like puzzle pieces that have found their match. Then, a flat stone is rolled across the seam to smooth it out, pressing away air bubbles. The result is seamless, a quiet triumph of patience and craft.
You watch one scroll grow longer as more sheets are added. 10 sheets, then 20. Soon it measures several meters. The artisan holds it up, checks the line of the seam, and nods in satisfaction. The papyrus glows faintly in the light, thin yet durable, like the skin of an ancient tree. In Egypt, scrolls were the form of permanence. Unlike clay tablets, which cracked or crumbled, papyrus could be rolled, stored, and carried. It was light, flexible, and elegant, a material worthy of gods and kings alike. Across the room, another worker carefully aligns a narrow wooden rod along the end of the scroll. This will become the umbilicus, the rolling core, made from reed or acacia. He fastens it with strips of linen and adhesive, then begins to roll the papyrus tightly around it, smoothing it as he goes. The roll thickens, the sound of dry fibers brushing against each other, filling the air like a whisper. For the Egyptians, even the act of rolling a scroll had a rhythm. It was done with care, ensuring that the writing faced inward to protect it from dust and sunlight. When complete, the scroll would be tied with a linen cord and sealed with clay, stamped with the scribe's or temple's emblem. The result wasn't just a document, it was a vessel of memory. You notice a pile of scrolls nearby, already sealed and labeled. The titles are written in red ink on the outside edge, so a scribe could tell at a glance which text he was reaching for. Some are short, no more than a few feet long. Others stretch to lengths of 20 or 30 feet. These would have contained epic tales, rituals, or royal decrees. The air smells of glue and faint resin mixed with the dry sweetness of papyrus. It's a scent that seems ancient and alive, as if the room itself remembers what it's for. One of the older scribes, his fingers stained with soot and gum, gestures for you to come closer. "These are for the temple," he says quietly, pointing to a stack wrapped in linen. "The hymns of Amun, the prayers for sunrise, the list of offerings." He smiles faintly. "Words to feed the gods." You realize that, in a way, this room feeds both gods and time itself. Every stroke of ink, every joined seam, every seal pressed into soft clay is an act of preservation. Through these scrolls, thoughts can cross generations without fading. The old man picks up a finished scroll and unrolls a few inches to check the ink. "The papyrus holds memory better than stone," he says. "Stone remembers only shape, papyrus remembers voice." Outside, the heat of midday rises, shimmering through the window. Workers pause to drink from clay cups filled with cool water and honey. You follow one to the shaded courtyard, where a small pool reflects the sky. Even here, scrolls are being dried on raised racks, flat, wide boards that keep them safe from insects and dust. A gentle breeze stirs the edges of the sheets. You can hear the faint creak of fibers stretching, tightening. In this quiet, the world feels still. A few scrolls are destined for the royal archives, others for temples, and some for private homes. The ones for the archives are treated with the greatest care, dried longer, wrapped in finer linen, and sometimes brushed with cedar oil to protect them from decay. The smell of cedar, sharp and comforting, fills the room like a promise. You imagine these scrolls hundreds of years from now, perhaps lying in a sealed tomb beside their owners. The dry desert air will preserve them, and the ink will remain black, the words legible. The scribe's hand, his breath, his patience, all frozen in those thin sheets. One of the apprentices joins you by the window. He holds a scroll that's still damp, turning it gently in the light. "This one," he says, "tells the journey of a man to the afterlife, the path through the gates, the weighing of the heart." His voice drops to a whisper. "They say the scroll guides the soul." You think of that even in death, The written word lights the way.
The apprentice smiles and adds softly, "The scrolls are not just for reading, they are for remembering who we are." You sit beside him, listening to the faint rustle of papyrus and the buzz of flies in the warm air. It's peaceful, meditative. Time seems to stretch and slow. The act of creation here feels timeless, like the Nile itself, flowing endlessly, yet never rushing.
In another corner, a scribe prepares to inscribe the final lines of a long text. He straightens the papyrus, dips his reed pen, and begins to write. The sound is steady and rhythmic. Scratch, lift, dip, scratch. His concentration is total. When he finishes, he draws a small symbol at the bottom, a simple mark meaning it is complete. Then, carefully, he rolls the scroll, ties it with a narrow cord, and presses a small clay seal over the knot. His thumbprint remains faintly visible in the clay, a signature of touch across millennia. You imagine this scroll, thousands of years later, being unrolled by curious hands in a museum or a tomb. The ink still dark, the words still clear. Perhaps those future readers will feel what you feel now, that strange intimacy between writer and reader, between then and now. The workshop begins to quiet as the day fades. The last scrolls are stacked neatly in woven baskets, ready to be carried to the temple or stored in the archive. Someone closes the shutters, dimming the golden light. A faint hum of chanting drifts in from the nearby temple, priests offering evening prayers. The melody is low, soothing, ancient. The scribes pause their work, bow their heads for a moment, and then continue tying the last chords. You breathe in deeply, the air filled with the scent of gum, ink, papyrus, and the first hint of night. It feels like standing inside a heartbeat frozen in time. One scribe lights a small oil lamp, setting it beside a nearly finished scroll. The flame flickers, casting long shadows across the room. The light glints off the ink, making the hieroglyphs shimmer like stars. For a fleeting moment, it feels as though the room is full of constellations. Each scroll, each word, a tiny fragment of eternity. The scribe closes the scroll gently and sets it aside. The day is done, he says, stretching his hands. You step outside into the cool twilight. The city is quieter now, the Nile reflecting streaks of gold and indigo. Somewhere in the distance, a fisherman hums softly to himself. You walk slowly along the water's edge, your mind lingering on what you've witnessed. The joining of fibers, the flow of ink, the slow rhythm of patience. The papyrus scrolls will soon travel across Egypt, to libraries, temples, tombs. Some will hold songs, others laws, and some perhaps simple letters from one heart to another. And though centuries may pass, the papyrus will endure. Its voice, soft, steady, and eternal, will whisper on. The night cools, and by morning, the streets of Thebes are alive again with the muted rhythm of a civilization that has found harmony in repetition. You stroll along the worn stones, past markets and bakeries, until the familiar scent of ink and papyrus leads you back toward the temple complex. Today, the air feels different, more reverent, more careful. You're not entering just any scribe's room this time, but the house of life, where words themselves are sacred. The per-ankh, as the Egyptians called it, was part library, part school, part divine workshop. Inside, everything is ordered and quiet. The scribes here aren't writing shopping lists or tax records. They're transcribing hymns, myths, and rituals, the living script of the gods themselves. You pause near the doorway. A low chant hums through the room, steady and slow, as if the words have a heartbeat. A senior priest, his head shaved and robe spotless, moves between rows of wooden desks. Each scribe is bent over a roll of papyrus, hieroglyphs flowing beneath their hands like tiny carvings in ink. You take a step closer and notice that the hieroglyphs shimmer faintly under the light of the oil lamps. The lines are crisp, deliberate, almost reverent. Each sign carries more than sound. It carries meaning, myth, and spirit. The Egyptians didn't just write words, they sculpted power into language. You find yourself standing beside a young scribe, his reed pen trembling slightly as he copies the hymn to Ra. The words describe the sun god's journey across the sky and through the underworld each night, battling chaos to bring light again. Every symbol feels alive. The scribe whispers each one under his breath as he writes, believing that speaking the word gives it strength. In this world, writing isn't a mere skill, it's a sacred act. The Egyptians called hieroglyphs medu-necher, the words of the gods. Writing them required not only precision, but purity. Scribes bathed before beginning, trimmed their nails, and avoided certain foods on holy days. To miswrite a god's name wasn't just an error, it could be a spiritual offense. You imagine the patience it takes to learn this art. Hieroglyphic writing wasn't a quick thing. Over 700 signs existed in various forms, some pictorial, some symbolic, some purely phonetic. It took years to master them, and even longer to understand their poetic combinations. One mainstream historical fact drifts to mind: the Rosetta Stone, found much later by modern scholars, would one day unlock these mysteries, revealing how Greek, Demotic, and hieroglyphic texts all carried the same meaning. But for now, here in the flickering lamplight of 1200 BCE, no one needs a stone to tell them what these signs mean. They already live and breathe within the Egyptian heart. The head priest passes by again, pausing beside one table where a scribe has made a slight smudge. The priest frowns, not in anger, but in concern. The scribe bows his head, whispers a quiet apology, and carefully re-inks the damaged line. The papyrus absorbs it, as though forgiving the error. Hieroglyphs are more than pretty pictures. They bridge the human and divine. They appear on tomb walls, obelisks, and statues, immortalizing the lives of those who wish to be remembered. But when transferred to papyrus scrolls, they gain new life, fluid, portable, eternal. You watch as another scribe works in a more cursive script, hieratic, the swift, elegant shorthand used for letters, ledgers, and everyday texts. It's the same language, but softened, simplified for speed. His reed pen moves more freely, the strokes smoother, like the Nile in calm weather. It's a mesmerizing contrast, hieroglyphs for eternity, hieratic for the moment. You imagine scholars centuries later debating which was purer. Historians still argue whether hieratic developed out of convenience or necessity, whether it was the child of practicality or poetry. Either way, it allowed the written word to travel farther and faster into the lives of ordinary people. And here's a quirky tidbit. Some scribes doodled in the margins, tiny sketches of cats chasing mice or caricatures of their supervisors. A few even wrote jokes. One surviving papyrus includes the line, "The scribe who doesn't study is like a farmer with no field." You can almost hear the collective groan of apprentices rolling their eyes. You drift deeper into the room and stop beside a great papyrus roll, half finished and spread across a low table. Its symbols are painted in alternating black and red inks, red for divine names and instructions, black for the body of the text. The pigments shimmer faintly, catching the lamplight in a warm, sleepy glow. "Color is sacred," a priestly scribe murmurs as he notices you watching. "Black is for life, red for power. Never confuse them." He points at a line where the god Thoth, patron of wisdom and writing, is depicted with the head of an ibis, holding a palette and pen. He sees what we write, the scribe adds, half serious, half smiling. So we write carefully. You can't help but smile back. The god of writing watching over writers? It feels oddly familiar. You imagine modern authors glancing nervously at their spell check, whispering, "Please don't smite me for that typo."
Outside, a breeze stirs the palm fronds, carrying in the faint hum of the city. Inside, the sound of pens scratching on papyrus is rhythmic, hypnotic, a steady lullaby of creation. The scribes' voices fade into the background hum of time itself. One apprentice recites his lesson aloud from memory, his voice shaky. Writing is the path to eternity. Through it, a man speaks even after death. The master nods approvingly. The line is ancient, carved once on temple walls, now copied onto countless scrolls. It's the essence of Egyptian belief, immortality through words. You glance around and realize that the entire temple complex seems to echo that sentiment. Every wall, every column, every scroll whispers, "Remember me." The scribes here are not just record keepers, they are architects of memory. As the afternoon deepens, the priests finish their tasks and place the completed scrolls in wooden chests. Each chest is labeled and carried reverently to a side chamber, the archive. Inside, the air is cooler, dry, and still. Rows upon rows of scrolls line the shelves, wrapped in linen and marked with red ink. Some contain hymns, others spells, some medical texts describing remedies of honey and resin. You pause before one labeled, "Book of Coming Forth by Day." You know this one by its modern name, the Book of the Dead. It wasn't morbid as the title suggests. It was a guidebook for the soul, a companion for the journey beyond life. The words within promised light and renewal, not darkness. You trace a finger along the label, imagining the scribe who wrote it, the family who commissioned it, the soul who would rely on it. Even now, the papyrus feels alive under your touch, as though pulsing with quiet purpose. Back in the main room, the head priest lights incense, a mixture of myrrh, cinnamon, and frankincense. The smoke drifts upward, softening the lamplight into golden haze. It smells both sweet and ancient, like something that belongs between worlds. The scribes bow their heads, their hands resting on their palettes. For a moment, everything is still. The pens, the voices, even the air. You can almost feel the weight of millennia pressing gently on your shoulders. Here, inside the house of life, writing is not just communication, it's creation. To write is to make something real. You stand in silence, the sound of your breath mingling with the faint rustle of papyrus and the slow sigh of the incense. Somewhere in the distance, you hear the Nile again, murmuring like an old storyteller. It's a reminder. While the river carries silt and life, the scribes carry memory and meaning. Both flow endlessly, shaping everything in their path. As the lamps burn lower and the last scrolls are sealed, you step outside once more into the deep blue of evening. The temple walls glow softly, covered in carvings that mirror the scrolls within, hieroglyphs eternal and luminous. You tilt your head back and imagine the gods themselves reading the sky, each star another word in a divine script. And for a fleeting second, you feel like you're part of it, a single line in a vast, unending story written in light and ink. The morning mist hangs low over the Nile, soft and silver, as you make your way back toward the scribe's quarter. The faint chatter of birds echoes through the reeds, and somewhere nearby, someone beats linen on a flat stone, the rhythm carrying through the cool air. Today, your path leads you to one of the quietest yet most vital corners of Egyptian life,
the place where words are assembled into their final, enduring form, the complete papyrus scroll. You step through an open doorway into a long, low building. The scent of paste, ink, and old wood fills your nose, a familiar perfume by now. Inside, several scribes are bent over their work tables, surrounded by stacks of papyrus sheets and slender rods. It's not loud here, but alive with the soft murmurs of concentration and the whisper of fibers rubbing together. The process begins where Section 5 left off, with sheets being joined. You see rows of them drying, edges trimmed neatly, each sheet polished with a smooth stone to create a delicate sheen. The sunlight from the open roof panels dances across their golden surfaces, giving the room a warm, sleepy glow. You drift closer to one scribe who is carefully inspecting a sheet for flaws. A tiny air bubble, a faint tear, a wrinkle. Any imperfection could ruin a text meant to last centuries. He sighs, trims the damaged edge, and smooths it again. "The papyrus remembers," he says quietly, "so we give it only what's worthy." When a scroll is ready to be assembled, the work shifts from crafting to creation. Several sheets are laid end to end, glued at their overlapping seams until the scroll stretches across the table like a golden river. You can almost hear the fibers settling, bonding. It's strangely satisfying, the way something so fragile can become so strong through patience and care. This particular scroll will hold a royal decree, a law issued by the pharaoh himself. The scribe tasked with copying it works slowly, reverently. Every stroke of his pen carries the authority of a living god. He begins by sketching a line of faint red guidelines across the top, ensuring perfect alignment. Then, in black ink, he writes the words of command, each symbol deliberate and balanced. You lean closer, watching the fine details emerge. The tiny falcon of Horus, wings outstretched, the looping curls of divine names, the straight, proud lines of royal titles. The scribe pauses after each sentence to re-dip his reed pen, the tip making that soft, satisfying scratch-scratch against the papyrus. Historians still argue whether the average scribe understood the full weight of what he copied, whether he was merely a technician or a true scholar. But watching this one, you suspect the truth lies somewhere in between. His hands may be trained, but his eyes hold quiet devotion. He doesn't just write, he listens to the words as though they're being spoken through him. At the far end of the room, two apprentices handle the finishing touches. One rubs the scroll gently with a smooth ivory tool to press the ink deeper into the fibers, ensuring it won't flake or fade. The other rolls the finished portion carefully onto a wooden rod, wrapping it tight and even. When it's complete, he ties a narrow ribbon of linen around it, threads it through a soft clay seal, and stamps the emblem of the temple into the clay. The seal bears the sacred image of Thoth, the ibis-headed god of wisdom, his stylus poised in eternal writing. The scroll now feels alive. You can sense the hours, the care, the breath that went into it. Every curve of ink, every seam of papyrus holds the weight of time. But not every scroll in the room is meant for kings. Along one wall, simpler works are stacked in woven baskets. Letters, contracts, inventories, even love poems. You pick one up, careful not to smudge the ink. It's a fragment of a song, the handwriting loose and flowing. My heart is like the papyrus reed, bent toward your voice. It's unexpectedly tender, a reminder that even in a world of gods and rulers, people still wrote about love, longing, and the everyday humanness that never changes. You set it back gently, smiling. The scribe beside you chuckles. That one was found in a fisherman's hut, he says. Not every poet wears linen. You wander further and find another table where artisans are adding decorative touches. For sacred or royal texts, the first page, or rather the first segment, was often painted with color. Deep blues from ground azurite, reds from ochre, greens from malachite. You watch as a young artist outlines a figure of the goddess Ma'at, her feather of truth gleaming under the lamplight. The detail is stunning, yet the atmosphere stays calm, almost meditative. No rush, no noise, just quiet repetition. A rhythm you could fall asleep to if you weren't already halfway there. A senior scribe sits in the corner, rolling finished scrolls onto a larger spindle for inspection. He's humming softly, something between a chant and a lullaby. You sit beside him, watching as he weighs a scroll in his hands. This one, he says, contains the record of the year's harvests. It will be stored in the granary archive where no moisture may touch it.
He points to another, smaller one. And this, he adds, smiling, is a list of beer rations for the workers at the Temple of Karnak. We guard those lists more carefully than gold. You both laugh softly. A beer record surviving the centuries. It feels deliciously mundane. Yet it's these small fragments that often outlast the grand proclamations. Quirky, yes, but true. Archaeologists have found more papyri about grain, taxes, and beer than about kings and gods. The paperwork of eternity, it seems. As the day stretches on, you notice how the scrolls are categorized and stored. Some are rolled and bound, others are folded accordion style, an early experiment in compact storage. The scribes keep them in clay jars or wooden chests lined with linen to protect against moisture. Each chest is labeled with a short description written directly on the side, like an ancient filing system. The archivist explains, "We keep temple scrolls here, trade scrolls there, and letters in the smallest jars. And those," he points to a far corner, "are scrolls meant for the tombs." You glance at the pile, wrapped in linen and sealed with wax. "For the afterlife, you ask?"
He nods. Yes, the scrolls will accompany the dead, texts of protection, guidance, and remembrance. The words must follow the soul. You shiver slightly. The thought of a person resting for eternity beside their scroll feels both haunting and comforting. The Egyptians truly believed that writing was a bridge between worlds, that as long as one's name was written, one's spirit endured. A golden ray of late afternoon sun cuts through the doorway, catching dust in the air. It drifts across the room, touching the rows of finished scrolls. They glow faintly, as if lit from within. You imagine them years from now, buried in tombs or hidden in archives, waiting to be rediscovered. Historians might one day unroll these fragile texts and marvel at the handwriting, the texture, the faint smell of ancient glue. They'll see the world preserved not in stone, but in paper. And maybe, if they listen closely, they'll hear the hum of this very room, the whisper of fibers, the sigh of the scribe, the faint scrape of a pen. As evening approaches, the work slows. The scribes stretch, rub their tired wrists, and begin to tidy their tools. The ink bowls are sealed with lids of palm bark, the pens rinsed in cool water. The scrolls are stacked in careful rows, ready to be carried to their destinations. You linger by the doorway, looking back one last time. The lamps flicker, casting soft halos across the room. A few apprentices are still working, one painting a final red symbol at the top of a scroll, another brushing away stray fibers. The sound of their movements blends into a quiet rhythm, soothing and steady, like waves lapping against the shore. Before you leave, the oldest scribe looks up from his table and gives you a knowing smile. "Every scroll we make," he says, "is a small act of defiance against forgetting." You nod, feeling that truth settle deep within you. The world may crumble, the Nile may shift its course, but the scroll, the story, endures. Outside, the sun dips low over the river. its reflection a long band of gold stretching to the horizon. You walk slowly, the cool breeze carrying the faint scent of ink and papyrus. Somewhere in the distance, temple bells ring, soft and measured. You think of all those scrolls, rolled tight, sealed, waiting, and realize that each one is a time capsule, a heartbeat preserved in fiber and ink. The night air deepens, the sky glows violet. You breathe in, slow and steady, and let the thought linger. In the soft rustle of papyrus, the ancient world is still speaking. The morning arrives quietly, with the sound of the Nile moving lazily through its banks. The horizon glows in pale gold, and the air is cool enough that the breeze feels like silk against your skin. You wake to the distant sounds of life beginning again, oars dipping into the water, farmers calling to one another, and the faint thud of wooden doors opening for the day's work.
Today, your path takes you downstream toward a grand destination, the Royal Library at Thebes, where the collected wisdom of scribes, priests, and scholars rests in hundreds of papyrus scrolls. It is here that words become legacy and memory becomes monument. The journey itself is slow and soothing, following the river's lazy bends. The oar strokes are steady, the sun gentle, the air thick with the scent of water lilies. You watch the landscape drift by, clusters of date palms, narrow mud brick houses, and fields alive with green barley. Along the shore, children run barefoot through the reeds, laughing. A heron lifts off, its wings trailing droplets of morning light. It's a world both ancient and alive, every detail a quiet echo of the timeless rhythm Egypt has always known. By midday, you reach the docks at Thebes. The library stands within the temple complex, a structure of pale limestone and sandstone columns that gleam under the sun. Though smaller than the later library of Alexandria, this one holds treasures of its own: scrolls of law, medicine, astronomy, poetry, and sacred hymns to the gods. As you enter, the air changes. It's cooler here, heavy with the faint, sweet scent of aged papyrus and resin. The walls are inscribed with prayers for protection, blessings meant to guard the knowledge stored within. Torches burn low in clay sconces, their flames steady, casting slow-moving shadows across the hieroglyphs. The chief archivist, an elderly man with a soft, steady voice, greets you. His linen robe is simple, but the ink stains on his fingers speak of years spent in devotion to his craft. Knowledge, he says as you follow him down the long corridor, is the shadow the gods leave behind for us to follow. You step into a vast chamber lined with shelves and cubbyholes. Scrolls are arranged upright in clay jars, their ends marked with small tags of wood or ivory, each one inscribed with the scroll's title and author. The order seems effortless, yet precise. Every jar is labeled by subject: rituals of Ra, treatises on medicine, hymns of the harvest, stars and their movements. The archivist gestures toward a table near the center, where several scribes are at work copying fragile scrolls. Nothing lasts forever, he explains softly, so we copy what time threatens to take. You watch one of the scribes unroll a worn, faded scroll, its edges darkened, the writing faint but still legible. He reads a few lines aloud under his breath, then begins to copy them onto a fresh sheet of papyrus, his hand steady and deliberate. The process is almost sacred. For every character lost, another is reborn in ink. Nearby, another scribe works on something far more mysterious, a scroll of astronomical calculations. The sheet before him is covered in neat columns of hieroglyphs and tiny symbols representing the stars and their movements. He pauses often to consult a small wooden chart, a kind of celestial map. You ask him what he's studying, and he smiles without looking up. The paths of the gods, he says. When they walk the sky, we mark their footsteps. He explains how Egyptian priests used star positions to measure time, predict floods, and align temples. Each night, as they watched the heavens, they recorded the rising of Sirius, the brilliant star of Isis, whose appearance heralded the coming of the Nile's flood. To them, astronomy wasn't just science, it was divine rhythm, the heartbeat of creation itself. You find yourself marveling at how much of Egypt's stability, its agriculture, its calendar, its rituals, depended on these patient observers who turned the sky into scripture.
As you move deeper into the library, you notice another section filled with medical texts. The archivist invites you to sit beside him as he opens one carefully. The papyrus is old but strong, its ink a rich brown. This, he says, is from the time of the Old Kingdom. It contains remedies for fever, wounds, and the bites of serpents. He points to a passage written in graceful hieratic script. It describes how honey, fat, and lint should be applied to an open wound, one of the earliest recorded antiseptic treatments. Another section details the preparation of herbal infusions. Crushed garlic, dried coriander, and willow bark steeped in warm water.
These are the gifts of the gods, the archivist murmurs, smiling faintly, given to those who listen to the earth. The library, you realize, isn't just a place for learning. It's a map of the Egyptian mind. Here are the hymns that kept their faith alive, the records that built their cities, and the knowledge that healed their people. Everything written here is both practical and sacred, rooted in their belief that order, ma'at, must be preserved in all things.
A young apprentice enters, carrying a small clay jar filled with scroll fragments. He kneels beside a workbench, carefully piecing together torn sections like a puzzle. Found in a granary at Amarna, he tells the archivist, part of a lost hymn to Aten. The archivist nods, pleased. Then it must be sung again. There's something deeply peaceful in that idea, of knowledge rescued, restored, and reborn. The Egyptians seemed to live with one foot in eternity, always aware that what they wrote could outlive them by millennia. As you sit there, the soundscape of the library becomes a kind of lullaby. The rustle of papyrus sheets, the faint crackle of torches, the steady drip of cooling water from a jar. Time slows. Even the air feels thicker, older, as though layered with centuries of quiet thought. The archivist leads you to a smaller chamber where the most sacred texts are kept, the books of the afterlife. These include fragments of what modern scholars call the Book of the Dead, though to the Egyptians it was simply the Book of Coming Forth by Day. Each scroll is a guide for the soul's journey beyond death. You see beautifully painted scenes, the heart of the deceased weighed against the feather of Ma'at, the soul traveling through gates guarded by strange beings, the triumphant crossing into the field of reeds, a paradise of eternal harvests. The archivist's voice is soft, reverent. To read these words is to remember how to live, he says. They remind us that the world beyond is only a reflection of the world within. You linger on one passage written in careful hieroglyphs, its translation whispered by the archivist. May my name not be forgotten on earth. May my mouth speak, even when I am dust. It sends a small shiver down your spine. That's what all of this is for, you realize. The papyrus, the ink, the copying, the care. Every scroll is an answer to that prayer. As the afternoon wanes, the golden light deepens, streaming through narrow openings high above. Dust motes float lazily through the beams like drifting stars. A hush falls over the library. One by one, the scribes roll their scrolls, cap their ink, and bow their heads in brief prayer to Thoth.
The archivist escorts you to the doorway. Outside, the sound of the Nile drifts faintly on the wind. He looks out across the city and says quietly, "When the day comes that these walls crumble, the words will still find a way. Knowledge has its own afterlife." You step outside into the fading warmth, the sky now the color of honey and ash. The river gleams like a mirror, carrying the reflection of the temples and the palms. A sense of stillness settles over everything, deep and unbroken. You pause before leaving, glancing back once more at the doorway of the library, the threshold between silence and memory. Inside those walls, the voices of countless generations still whisper across time. You breathe in slowly, letting that thought fill you. The scribes, the archivists, the poets, they are all still here, their words still alive, written in light and air and patience. As the sun disappears beyond the horizon, you board a small boat bound home. The oars dip gently into the water, breaking the reflection of the sky. The motion rocks you softly, like a cradle. In the distance, the first evening stars appear, Sirius among them, bright and clear, just as it was thousands of years ago. You close your eyes and imagine the scribes of old watching that same star rise, marking another year, another cycle of life and death and rebirth. And in that quiet moment, you understand. The ancient Egyptians didn't just preserve their knowledge, they preserved the rhythm of time itself. The Nile murmurs beside you, the air cools, and as you drift downstream under the deepening night, the world feels timeless, peaceful, and infinitely alive. Dawn arrives slowly, stretching its pale fingers across the horizon, brushing the Nile with soft pink and gold. You awaken to the quiet rustle of palm fronds and the distant call of a heron lifting from the water. Today, your journey takes you to the workshop where papyrus is prepared for long-distance transport, an often overlooked but crucial step in ensuring that words endure even across kingdoms. You trudge along the riverbank, the scent of wet earth and river reeds clinging to your sandals. Boats lie at the water's edge, loaded with bundles of reeds, freshly harvested papyrus, and stacks of already rolled scrolls. You can hear the gentle slap of the Nile against the hulls and the soft, rhythmic creak of wooden oars. The overseer of the loading area, a broad-shouldered man with sun-baked skin, greets you with a nod. "Papyrus for Memphis, Heliopolis, and even Nubia," he says, gesturing to the neatly stacked bundles. Every scroll must travel safely. Even the finest words are useless if they crumble before they arrive. You step closer to watch as workers carefully wrap individual scrolls in linen, tying them with thin cords. Each scroll is checked for completeness. No tears, no ink smudges. The process is deliberate, almost ritualistic. You notice the care with which they handle each scroll, fingers sliding beneath the paper, lifting it gently as if it were a living thing. Papyrus was the primary writing material of Egypt for over 3 millennia, and it was exported throughout the Mediterranean and Near East. Romans and Greeks prized it for its flexibility, durability, and portability, using it to record everything from state documents to poetry. Without proper preparation, however, it could easily be damaged by humidity or rough handling. One worker hands you a scroll and demonstrates the proper rolling technique. The papyrus must be rolled with just the right tension, not too tight to prevent cracking, but not too loose to avoid unraveling. The first turn is gentle, followed by several careful rotations. Then a cord is looped around the center and tied in a knot, the ends tucked neatly beneath the wrapping. You practice on a scrap,
feeling the slight resistance and the delicate friction of fibers sliding against one another. Some scribes were known to mark their scrolls with tiny doodles or whimsical symbols along the inner edges, hidden from view, almost like secret signatures. Occasionally, a mischievous hand would leave a tiny caricature of the supervisor, something that might make future readers chuckle centuries later. The overseer lifts a large bundle and begins securing it to a flat-bottomed boat. Others follow, carefully stacking scrolls in wicker baskets cushioned with dried reeds. The boat rocks gently as they arrange the cargo, and you notice how every movement is synchronized, a quiet choreography perfected over countless trips.
Historians still argue whether the ancient Egyptians transported papyrus primarily by river or over land. Some suggest the Nile was the main artery, a reliable conveyor of goods and ideas, while others believe caravans carried scrolls across deserts for certain expeditions. Either way, the method required skill and patience.
Once the scrolls are secured, a few men set off downriver, the oars cutting silently through the water. You step onto the deck of one boat and feel the gentle sway beneath your feet. The wind carries the faint aroma of resin and ink. You imagine these same scrolls centuries from now, perhaps in a library far away, unrolled by curious hands, the ink still vivid, the words still breathing. On board, an apprentice shows you a set of small, fragile scrolls tied together with thin linen cords. These contain letters between merchants detailing the trade of grain, gold, and linen. He explains that even mundane correspondence was treated with care because it carried the lifeblood of commerce and communication. Each note, each transaction, was a thread in the fabric of Egyptian society. The boat drifts slowly, and you lean over the side, watching the reflection of the sky ripple across the river's surface. It is easy to forget the centuries that separate you from the original scribes, yet here you are, touching their world through the fragile medium of papyrus. A senior scribe, seated beside you, dips his hand into a small water jar and lightly pats the surface of a scroll. "Moisture can be fatal," he murmurs. "Even the slightest damp can make fibers swell and ink run. That is why we prepare, wrap, and tie so carefully." You watch as he inspects a particularly long scroll, stretching it across the deck to ensure it lies flat before being stowed. Its edges curl slightly, a natural response to centuries of careful layering. Every sheet has its own personality, some more pliant, some stubbornly stiff. Learning their behavior is part of the craft. You notice that some scrolls are shorter, intended for individual use, while others are long ceremonial texts, meant to be read aloud during rituals. The contrast between the everyday and the sacred is striking. All scrolls, regardless of content, travel with the same care. The Egyptians seemed to understand that permanence depended not only on content, but also on physical preservation. A small breeze brings the faint scent of baked clay from nearby villages, mingling with the resinous smell of the papyrus. You breathe it in, feeling an odd sense of calm and connection across time. Here, at this moment, the world is slow, deliberate, and exact. Every movement matters, every fiber counts. You follow the workers as they lower scrolls into shallow baskets, each labeled with a short description in red ink for identification. You trace the markings with your eyes. Hymns to Amun, inventory of grain, letters of trade. The simplicity and elegance of the system strikes you. Even thousands of years later, it makes perfect sense. A young apprentice bends over a scroll and traces the edge with his finger. "These are fragile," he whispers. "Handle them wrong, and centuries of thought could be lost." You feel a quiet awe at the responsibility placed upon hands like his, tiny guardians of memory. As the sun rises higher, you notice a family of river otters playing along the bank, their sleek bodies slipping in and out of the water. The scene is gentle, grounding, almost meditative. The scribes and laborers move with the same quiet grace, ensuring that every scroll, from the humblest letter to the most sacred hymn, is prepared for its journey.
The boat begins to move downstream again, carrying its precious cargo into the broader world. You feel the gentle sway, the lapping of the river against the hull, and the quiet, almost invisible pulse of civilization flowing past. You imagine the scrolls arriving in distant temples, courts, and homes, carrying the words of scribes long gone, but not forgotten. By evening, the boats dock, and scrolls are unloaded with equal care. They are carried up stone ramps, tied, and stored in carefully prepared chambers. The smell of dried reeds, ink, and river air mingles with the fading warmth of the day. Workers pat each scroll gently before placing it on wooden racks or inside clay jars. You pause to run your hands along a bundle of scrolls, feeling the texture of the papyrus beneath your fingers. Each sheet, each seam, each line of ink carries a story, a thought, a fragment of memory. The weight of history feels tangible here, held in your hands. The overseer nods at you, and you realize this is more than preparation, it's devotion. Every scroll, no matter how small or ordinary, is treated with reverence, because it is a vessel of continuity, a bridge between now and the distant future. The sun sets, casting the sky in amber and violet. The river reflects the colors, rippling gently. You watch the scrolls resting in their chests and jars, knowing that tomorrow they will carry words to other places, other hands, other minds. And in this slow, deliberate act, the scribes of Egypt defy the passage of time. The soft murmur of the Nile, the faint rustle of reeds, and the gentle sway of boats lull you into a quiet, reflective calm. Here, amid bundles of papyrus, you understand that history is not only written, it is carried, tended, and preserved. And as night descends, you step away from the river, feeling a gentle satisfaction. Every scroll, every carefully wrapped bundle is a testament. Words can travel, endure, and whisper across the centuries, even when their writers are long gone. The morning light filters gently through your window, carrying with it the subtle fragrance of the Nile and the distant calls of waterfowl. Today, your journey brings you to a quieter, more intimate aspect of papyrus life, the art of decoration and illustration that transforms a scroll from mere text into a living tableau of culture and imagination. You walk through a shaded courtyard where the air is filled with the scent of ink, crushed minerals, and dried plants. Along the walls, long tables hold sheets of papyrus in various stages of completion. Some are freshly glued and pale, awaiting ink. Others are adorned with bright pigments, the colors almost luminous in the soft sunlight. A gentle breeze moves through the courtyard, carrying dust motes that sparkle in the light like tiny fragments of eternity suspended in the air. Sitting at one table, an older scribe holds a nearly finished scroll depicting the pharaoh's ceremonial procession. His brush moves slowly, deliberately. He dips it into a shallow dish of ochre and carefully traces the contours of a chariot. The hieroglyphs beside it are written in deep black ink, while delicate lines of red highlight the pharaoh's divine attributes. This is not mere decoration, it is a synthesis of art and text. Every color, every line, every symbol is deliberate. The ancient Egyptians believed that the visual presentation of words could enhance their power. A word written in black conveys life and stability. A word accented in red conveys authority or divinity. You watch as the scribe carefully outlines each figure, aware that the combination of text and imagery will endure long after his hand is gone. Nearby,
A younger apprentice is painting a lotus motif along the margins of a scroll containing hymns to the goddess Isis. His strokes are light, tentative, yet precise. The lotus, symbol of rebirth and purity, is repeated in soft blues and greens, creating a rhythm along the scroll's edge. You notice that some of the smaller details are whimsical, a tiny ibis or a cat tucked among the flowers. Small flourishes that may never be noticed by the average reader, but speak to the scribe's personality and humor. Historians still argue whether these decorative elements were purely symbolic or if they served a practical mnemonic function. Perhaps the repetition of motifs helped scribes memorize long texts. Perhaps the embellishments were intended to honor the gods by making the scrolls beautiful. Either way, they add a layer of intimacy to the work, a connection between writer and reader that stretches across time. The soundscape of the courtyard is gentle. The soft tap of brushes against papyrus, the rustle of linen cords, the faint scrape of pencils and styluses. There is a rhythm here, meditative and soothing, the kind that lulls both scribe and visitor into a slow, reflective cadence. You can almost feel the energy of centuries contained within these fibers. A curious tidbit catches your attention. Some scribes used metallic powders mixed into their inks, which would shimmer subtly when light struck them at certain angles. These scrolls, intended for temple rituals or royal ceremonies, literally glowed with the presence of the divine, catching the eye and reinforcing the sacred nature of the words. Imagine opening such a scroll in dim candlelight. The letters would seem alive, dancing with an inner light. You drift to a separate table where an especially long scroll awaits illustration. It is a copy of a mythic tale detailing the journey of Ra through the underworld. The scribe lays out the narrative in sequential panels like a modern comic strip, each scene carefully framed with red and black borders. The characters, gods, demons, and mortals alike, are drawn with exaggerated gestures to emphasize their role in the story. You notice the deliberate choice of scale. Ra towers over the other figures, his solar disk painted in gold leaf, while the other entities shrink in relative importance. As you watch, the scribe whispers a faint prayer, dipping his brush and continuing. "May the words reach the heavens," he murmurs. "May the images honor the story, and may the scroll endure." It's a quiet, private act, both devotional and artistic. Even now, you can almost sense the energy of belief flowing from his hand into the papyrus. Across the courtyard, a young apprentice experiments with ink tones. Some hieroglyphs are in standard black, while others are muted brown, a mixture of soot and water. This subtle variation adds depth and texture to the scroll, making the text almost tactile. You touch a sheet and feel the slight ridges where the brushstroke dried, a reminder of the human hand behind every line. Historians still argue whether these subtle variations were standardized across Egypt or unique to each workshop. Perhaps both are true. Scribes may have learned standard forms, but expressed their individual artistry within those boundaries. Either way, the result is an intimate connection between creator and creation, a dialogue frozen in time. As the day wears on, you wander past rows of completed scrolls laid out to dry. Their edges curl slightly, a natural consequence of the papyrus fibers reacting to humidity and sunlight. Each one is tied carefully, ready for transport or storage. Some contain legal texts, others poems, hymns, or astronomical observations. But the decorative work elevates them beyond utilitarian objects. They become cultural artifacts, vessels of memory and beauty. A gentle laugh drifts from the far corner. A scribe has added a tiny caricature of his master chasing a mischievous cat along the bottom of a scroll.
It is almost invisible unless you lean close, a hidden joke that speaks to the everyday humanity of those who produced these sacred texts. Even as these scrolls preserve divine words, they also preserve the lives of those who wrote them.
You pause in front of a long ceremonial scroll, marveling at the precision and care. The images are arranged in perfect alignment with the text. Hieroglyphs and illustrations complement one another, creating a harmonious visual rhythm. The balance between sacred content and artistic expression is mesmerizing, a testament to the disciplined creativity of the Egyptian scribes. As the sun begins its descent, painting the courtyard in warm amber light, the scribes clean their brushes and tidy their tables. Dried pigments are swept into small jars for reuse. The last few sheets of papyrus are rolled carefully, and lamps are lit for the evening. The courtyard falls into a hushed tranquility, the soft glow of lamplight enhancing the golds and reds of the completed scrolls. You step back, breathing deeply. The room smells faintly of earth, ink, and minerals, comforting and ancient. The sun dips lower, and the shadows of palms stretch across the courtyard. You can almost hear the whisper of past generations, their hands moving in unison with yours through time. Each stroke of ink a heartbeat, each scroll a small monument to human persistence and devotion. Even in the quiet, you realize these scrolls are not static, they are alive, carrying stories, rituals, and knowledge from one hand to another, one generation to the next. Their survival depends not only on careful crafting and storage, but also on the reverence and patience of those who produce them. Every stroke, every color choice, every hidden doodle adds to their vitality. As the evening deepens and the courtyard empties, you stand amid the completed scrolls and feel a gentle calm settle over you. The world seems slower here, measured, deliberate, and enduring. You know that centuries from now, someone will unroll one of these scrolls, run their fingers over the ink, and feel the same connection you feel now, a quiet echo of devotion, artistry, and memory. The courtyard is silent now, save for the occasional rustle of palm fronds and the distant hum of the city settling for the night. You take a final deep breath, letting the colors, textures, and quiet patience of the scribe's work sink into your mind.
And as darkness falls, you step away from the workshop, the warm glow of the lamps fading behind you. You carry with you the rhythm of ink on papyrus, the soft scratch of brushes, and the intimate knowledge that the act of creating a scroll is, in itself, an enduring whisper across time. The day begins in a soft haze, with the faint warmth of the sun filtering through the reeds along the Nile. You rise early, feeling the coolness of the river breeze against your skin as you walk toward a familiar workshop where papyrus scrolls are not just written, but meticulously stored and cataloged for longevity. Today, you witness the careful choreography that ensures these fragile creations survive the centuries. You step inside a long, low building where the air is faintly sweet with the scent of dried papyrus and the tang of mineral inks. Several scribes are already at work, kneeling beside low tables where scrolls lie in various stages of readiness. The soft murmur of their voices blends with the gentle scratch of reed pens, creating a tranquil, meditative rhythm that seems to slow time itself. At one end of the room, a senior scribe supervises the labeling and cataloging of scrolls. Each scroll is inspected for imperfections, small tears, ink smudges, or inconsistencies in writing. When necessary, it is repaired with delicate patches of papyrus, adhered with a mixture of water and a natural plant-based glue. The process is precise, almost ceremonial, reflecting the reverence with which the Egyptians treated the written word.
A mainstream historical fact, Egyptian scribes were responsible not only for writing, but also for preserving texts for future generations. This meticulous care is why so many papyri have survived for millennia, allowing modern scholars to reconstruct aspects of daily life, religion, and governance in ancient Egypt. You notice a peculiar habit among some scribes. Before handling a scroll, they sprinkle a tiny amount of sand on their hands, then rub it lightly to remove excess moisture and oils. This ensures that the delicate fibers are not damaged by skin contact and gives the scroll a faintly granular texture that you can feel under your fingertips. It is a quirky, almost ritualistic practice, yet profoundly effective.
Historians still argue whether these preservation techniques were standardized or varied between workshops. Some evidence suggests that scribes developed individual methods passed down through apprenticeship, which could explain the subtle differences observed in surviving papyri. Regardless, the underlying goal remained the same: to protect the words from decay, damage, or loss. You move toward a stack of recently completed scrolls, their edges curled slightly from drying. The senior scribe lifts each one, inspecting it in the soft morning light, and gently rolls it onto a smooth wooden rod. Once rolled, the scrolls are tied with linen cords, labeled with red ink, and placed in clay jars or wooden chests for storage. The jars are lined with linen or straw, providing cushioning against moisture and pests. Nearby, an apprentice arranges scrolls according to subject, administrative records in another, and personal letters in yet another. This organization allows for easy retrieval, ensuring that the knowledge contained within each scroll can be accessed without unnecessary handling. You watch him carefully adjust the scrolls, ensuring that none press too tightly against one another. A whimsical detail catches your eye. One jar contains a set of small scrolls with doodles of cats playing among the hieroglyphs. They are clearly intended as a private joke, hidden from most readers. A playful reminder that, even in a serious, sacred environment, human nature leaves its mark. You wander to a separate table, where scrolls destined for tombs and ritual use are being prepared. These are treated with particular care. Their surfaces are polished, edges trimmed, and ink reinforced with natural resins to prevent fading. Some feature illustrations in vivid colors, while others rely solely on carefully executed hieroglyphs. These scrolls will accompany the deceased into the afterlife, acting as guides and protectors in a realm beyond living memory. The senior scribe lifts one such scroll and points to a depiction of the goddess Ma'at, her feather of truth depicted in delicate black ink. "Every line here matters," he says. "A single mistake can alter meaning, and in sacred texts, meaning is everything." His voice is soft, almost reverent as he continues. "That is why we guard the scrolls with our hands and our hearts." You trace the lines of the hieroglyphs, feeling the slight ridges of ink against the smooth surface of the papyrus. Each mark is a heartbeat, a deliberate act of preservation, a moment in time captured for eternity. The care lavished on these scrolls is both practical and symbolic, a testament to the Egyptians' belief that writing preserves life and spirit. Historians still debate whether the symbolic act of preserving texts influenced the physical techniques used, or whether practical needs drove ritualized practices. The answer is likely a combination, necessity intertwined with devotion, producing methods that were effective and meaningful. You move toward the storage section, where scrolls are being cataloged in a meticulous ledger. Each entry includes the title, author, date, and a brief description of the content. The red ink headings contrast with the black text, creating a visual hierarchy that guides the eye. The system is both functional and elegant, reflecting the Egyptian emphasis on order, ma'at,
in all aspects of life. A few apprentices are practicing the gentle art of rolling and unrolling scrolls without causing damage. They work slowly, concentrating on tension, alignment, and finger placement. One of them pauses, looks at you, and whispers, "Every scroll is a little world. Treat it kindly, or it won't survive." You smile, understanding that this is not exaggeration. It is the philosophy behind every careful movement in the room. Outside, the sun climbs higher, and the soft scent of the river drifts in through open windows. You notice a scribe pausing to watch the water, a moment of quiet reflection amidst the meticulous labor. Perhaps he draws inspiration from the Nile itself, the steady, enduring current that has witnessed centuries of human life and continues to flow with patient persistence. Quirky as it sounds, some scribes would hum quietly while cataloging scrolls, a soft tune meant to ease concentration and encourage careful attention. You listen for a moment, catching the faint melody, almost like a lullaby woven into the act of preservation. The day advances, and the tasks continue. Scrolls are inspected, rolled, tied, labeled, and stored. The rhythm is slow, deliberate, and meditative. The scribe's devotion ensures that each scroll, regardless of content, will endure. Even the smallest, humblest texts are treated with the same reverence as sacred hymns. As afternoon fades into evening, the room takes on a warm, amber glow. The last few scrolls are secured in jars and chests, the floor swept, and the work tables cleared. The soft hum of the Nile outside blends with the gentle rustle of remaining papyrus fibers. You take a final look around, feeling a sense of quiet awe. Every scroll in this room is a link between past and future, a fragile yet enduring vessel of thought. You understand that the Egyptians didn't merely write, they curated, preserved, and honored knowledge, creating a legacy that would whisper across millennia. As night falls, you step outside, letting the warm glow of sunset wash over you. The river reflects the fading light, rippling gently. In the quiet, you carry with you the image of rows of scrolls, their fibers infused with ink, care, and devotion. The thought is comforting. In these delicate bundles, the past endures, patiently waiting to be discovered, read, and remembered. The morning air is cool and still as you walk along the riverbank, the scent of mud and papyrus mingling with the faint aroma of baked clay from nearby homes. Today, your path leads you to the merchant's quarter, where papyrus scrolls are prepared for trade, sale, and distribution. This part of the papyrus's journey is quieter, but just as essential as the careful crafting and cataloging you've witnessed. Without it, even the most meticulously written scrolls would remain trapped in workshops and archives, unread and forgotten. You trudge along narrow streets, past stalls selling pottery, linen, and baskets woven from reeds. Merchants greet one another with nods and murmurs, moving their goods with steady hands and quiet efficiency. At the center of the market, you find the papyrus distributors, a small, organized group of scribes and traders responsible for preparing scrolls for travel. They sit on low benches under a shaded awning, surrounded by piles of finished scrolls, bundles of blank papyrus, and small jars of resin and ink. A merchant gestures for you to join him, explaining the delicate process of preparing scrolls for transport. Even the finest papyrus can be damaged by moisture, heat, or rough handling, he says. We take care to protect the words as if they were living beings. You watch as he wraps each scroll in soft linen, securing it with cord and adding a small tag that indicates its contents and destination. Ancient Egypt exported papyrus throughout the Mediterranean and Near East, reaching Greece, Rome, and beyond. Merchants often traveled long distances, sometimes through deserts or along the Nile, ensuring that letters, legal documents, and literary works reached their intended recipients intact. Without these traders, the knowledge contained in papyrus would have been far more localized and ephemeral. You notice a young apprentice carefully dusting a scroll with a fine powder, an unusual technique meant to absorb any lingering moisture and prevent mold. It seems almost ritualistic, a quiet devotion wrapped in practicality. You can't help but smile at the ingenuity of it, simple yet effective. Historians still argue whether papyrus trade was tightly regulated by the state or largely left to individual merchants. Some evidence suggests both. The state maintained oversight for official documents and large-scale shipments, while smaller private trades were handled independently. Either way, preparation was key. The merchant picks up a particularly long scroll, explaining that it contains instructions for temple rituals in a distant city. He rolls it carefully, ties it with a cord, and places it in a wicker basket lined with reeds. The wicker provides cushioning, protecting the scroll from shocks during transport, while the cord ensures that it remains tightly rolled. You gently pick up a scroll yourself, feeling the slight resistance of the fibers as you roll it neatly onto a wooden rod. Nearby, a group of traders prepare scrolls for export via boat. Each scroll is labeled, cataloged, and stacked in small wooden crates or clay jars. The crates are padded with straw, and the jars are sealed with clay lids to protect the contents from humidity. It's a slow, deliberate process, requiring patience and precision. A quirky detail catches your attention. Some merchants use small charms or amulets tucked between scrolls, believed to protect the papyrus from fire, water, or theft during transit. You watch a young scribe carefully place a tiny figurine of Bes, the protective deity, into a crate before closing it. It seems almost humorous, yet you can't deny the sense of comfort it provides, both to the handler and perhaps to the scroll itself. The market is lively, but the work is methodical. Scrolls are sorted according to destination, type, and importance. Letters and contracts are placed in one section, religious texts in another, and literary works or poetry in yet another. Every scroll is accounted for, carefully checked for completeness, and tied with care before leaving the market. You pause to watch as a small fleet of boats prepares to leave the docks. Scrolls are loaded with gentle hands, tied securely to prevent slipping, and covered with reed mats to shield them from the sun. The oarsmen dip their blades in unison, the boats gliding silently down the river, carrying the words of Egypt to distant lands. You lean over the railing, imagining the journey ahead, the scrolls floating past temples, villages, and fields, bearing messages, laws, and stories across time and space. A young apprentice shows you a set of letters between merchants and clients, detailing the trade of grain, linen, and pottery. He explains that even mundane correspondence was treated with care, because it was essential for the functioning of society. A torn or lost letter could disrupt trade, cause disputes, or lead to misunderstandings. The Egyptians understood the practical power of words, as well as their spiritual and cultural significance. Historians still debate how frequently papyrus was reused or recycled. Some scrolls show evidence of multiple layers of writing, where older texts were scraped away to make room for new ones. You notice a few scrolls in the market with faint traces of earlier ink, hints of conversations, prayers, or calculations long forgotten but still partially visible, ghosts of the past pressed beneath the present. You walk among the merchants, feeling the texture of wrapped scrolls under your fingertips. Some are soft and supple, while others are slightly rigid, the fibers hardened by time and careful drying. You notice that even small differences in preparation affect how a scroll behaves, whether it curls easily, holds ink cleanly, or rolls without resistance. The scribes and merchants are masters of this tactile knowledge,
passed down through apprenticeship and experience. As the day progresses, you observe the final touches: seals pressed into clay, tags inscribed with red ink, and cords tied in secure knots. Every scroll, no matter its destination, receives the same careful attention. The merchants treat their cargo as precious, not only because it carries value, but because it embodies knowledge, culture, and human connection. A gentle breeze drifts through the market, carrying the scent of resin, ink, and the river. You watch as the last boats push off into the Nile, their cargo of scrolls swaying gently with the motion of the water. You feel a sense of satisfaction and wonder. Each scroll is now on its journey, carrying words, ideas, and stories to places far from their point of origin. The sun begins to set, casting long shadows across the market and painting the river in shades of amber and violet. Merchants begin to tidy their stalls, sweeping away scraps of papyrus and straw, while apprentices roll up unused sheets and pack away brushes, ink, and tools. The market grows quiet, leaving only the gentle murmur of the Nile and the occasional cry of a bird in the distance. You take a deep breath, feeling the rhythm of the day settle into your mind. Scrolls have been rolled, tied, labeled, and sent on their way. Knowledge, once fragile and local, is now traveling across the land and beyond, carried by careful hands and patient minds. The Egyptians understood that their words, like the river itself, could flow across time, connecting generations and preserving their civilization in subtle, enduring ways.
And as night falls, you walk along the riverbank, listening to the soft lapping of water against the boats. The scrolls are gone, but you can almost sense them drifting, alive with ink and fiber, whispering across the centuries. The world feels quiet, deliberate, and infinite, a slow and steady testament to the enduring power of human care, patience, and thought. The morning is gentle, the sunlight spilling over the Nile like warm honey, and the air is tinged with the faint scent of papyrus and river reeds. Today, your journey carries you to a quieter, more reflective space, the scribe's study, where scrolls are not only read or written, but contemplated. This is the realm of understanding, where words transform into thought, ideas into memory, and the delicate fibers of papyrus become a bridge between mind and eternity. You step inside a modest room lined with low shelves. Scrolls are arranged with meticulous care, their ends protected by linen wraps or small clay cylinders. The floor is scattered with reed mats, and in one corner, a small brazier emits a faint, comforting smoke from burned frankincense. The atmosphere is calm, meditative, almost sacred. A young scribe, seated cross-legged at a low table, looks up and greets you softly. "Here," he says, gesturing to the scrolls before him, "we make sense of what has been written." You kneel beside him, noticing the variety of scrolls. Some dense with hieroglyphs, others lightly illustrated, and a few annotated in smaller script along the margins. Each contains knowledge gathered over generations, astronomical observations, medical remedies, hymns, poetry, and records of daily life. Ancient Egyptian scribes were highly trained, often apprenticing for years to master writing, mathematics, and ritual knowledge. Their work was essential for administration, religion, commerce, and culture. Without scribes, the machinery of Egyptian civilization, from the pharaoh's decrees to temple rituals, would have ground to a halt. You watch the young scribe unroll a scroll depicting the cycles of the Nile, each month carefully marked, with notes on planting, harvesting, and festival dates. His fingers trace the lines slowly, as if reading aloud through touch. He pauses,
pointing to a tiny mark in the margin. Some add notes for clarification, he whispers. Others include personal reflections, like tiny conversations across time. Quirky as it seems, some scribes added personal doodles, playful symbols, or even secret jokes in hidden corners of scrolls. These were never meant for formal readers, but created an invisible thread of humanity, connecting writer to observer in a quiet, intimate way. You spot a small sketch of a baboon near the edge of a medical text, its exaggerated expression oddly humorous. Historians still debate whether such annotations were considered acceptable or subversive. Some suggest they were tolerated as harmless distractions. Others argue they reflect a subtle way scribes asserted individuality within the constraints of strict ritual and bureaucratic standards. Either way, these small marks make the scrolls feel alive, imbued with the presence of their creators. The scribe opens another scroll, this one detailing remedies for common ailments, fevers, wounds, and snake bites. The text is precise, each line carefully written, yet there are small flourishes along the margins indicating variance or personal observations. He explains that scribes sometimes adjusted treatments based on experience, blending practical knowledge with textual authority. You feel a deep sense of continuity, centuries of experimentation, observation, and careful record-keeping preserved on a single sheet of papyrus. You notice the physicality of the scrolls, the slight grain of the fibers, the tension of the rolled edges, and the way ink sits on the surface, sometimes absorbing unevenly, creating subtle texture. Handling the scroll is an intimate act. Each roll, unroll, and touch connects you with the centuries of human thought encoded within. Nearby, a slightly older scribe reads aloud from a poetic text. The lines describe the journey of the sun god through the underworld, and the rhythm of the words is almost musical. You notice how the combination of text and oral recitation reinforces memory and comprehension, an ancient form of ASMR, if you will, where the cadence of words soothes both scribe and listener. A mainstream fact emerges again. Egyptian scribes frequently used their own voices to memorize and transmit texts, ensuring accuracy in copying and creating a subtle oral visual tradition. This combination of written and spoken word strengthened memory and preserved cultural continuity. The scribe leans back, pointing to a series of marginal notes on the scroll before him. These are corrections, he says, sometimes centuries after the original was written. You watch him trace the faded marks with a finger, marveling at how scribes of different generations collaborated across time. One hand writes, another reviews, and still another annotates, an invisible relay of knowledge extending across decades or even centuries.
Quirkily, some of these annotations include tiny personal prayers or superstitions meant to protect the scroll. You see small crosses, tiny drawings of eyes, and abstract symbols tucked into the margins, a silent acknowledgement that even words themselves might need guardianship.
The room is silent, but for the soft rustle of papyrus and the occasional distant call of a bird outside. You sit quietly, absorbing the slow rhythm of reflection. In this space, scrolls are not just objects, they are active participants in the shaping of thought, memory, and culture. Each line of text carries weight, each annotation adds depth, and each careful handling preserves the delicate bridge between past and present.
Historians still argue whether scribes primarily saw themselves as recorders of divine or human knowledge. Perhaps both impulses were at work, one hand documenting the world as it was, another interpreting it, adding nuance, correction, and understanding. Whatever the case, you feel the profound patience and devotion that made such continuity possible.
You pick up a small, unfinished scroll and roll it gently between your hands. The fibers are soft, pliant, and faintly textured. You imagine the scribe who started it centuries ago, carefully choosing each character, considering meaning, and adding small annotations to guide future readers. It is a quiet miracle that it has survived. Outside, the sun begins to dip, casting long amber shadows across the courtyard. The scribes tidy their tables, clean their brushes, and prepare for evening. Scrolls are re-rolled, tied with linen cords, and returned to storage. The soft glow of the setting sun illuminates the papyrus, emphasizing the subtle ridges of ink and the careful craftsmanship of each hand-drawn line. You rise and step outside, letting the warm evening breeze carry the faint scent of river and reeds. The sun dips below the horizon, and the sky darkens to deep violet and gold. You realize that the work in this quiet room, reading, contemplating, and annotating, ensures that papyrus is not merely paper, but a living repository of knowledge and memory, a vessel that carries human thought across centuries. And as night settles over the Nile, you feel a sense of calm reverence. Scrolls, once written, read, and annotated, are not just objects. They are companions across time, whispering their stories to those willing to handle them with patience, care, and quiet curiosity. The day dawns slowly, painted with soft shades of gold and lavender, and you find yourself wandering back to the riverbank, where the final stages of the papyrus journey unfold, the long-term storage and preservation that ensures the words endure for generations. Today, you are surrounded by the quiet guardianship of history, a calm, deliberate rhythm where patience outweighs haste and reverence outweighs urgency. You step into a large, airy repository, a hall lined with wooden racks, clay jars, and linen-wrapped bundles of scrolls. The air smells faintly of papyrus, resin, and dried reeds. Sunlight filters through small, high windows, casting gentle stripes across the rows of carefully stored texts. Each bundle, jar, or chest represents months, perhaps years, of meticulous work. You feel an immediate sense of quiet awe at the weight of history resting in the room. A senior curator greets you with a nod, his hands already busy checking bundles and jars for moisture, signs of pests, or shifts in alignment. He demonstrates how scrolls are placed on racks, rolled in even tension, labels facing outward for easy identification, and small strips of linen placed between adjacent scrolls to prevent friction. The process is slow, methodical, almost meditative. Ancient Egyptians stored important scrolls in temples, archives, and royal libraries. These repositories were often climate-controlled in a natural sense. Thick walls, high ceilings, and shaded locations helped to maintain steady humidity and temperature. Proper storage was crucial to prevent decay, mold, or insect damage. You watch an apprentice gently lift a jar of small scrolls, running his fingers over the lid to ensure a tight seal. He opens it carefully, revealing a series of legal contracts neatly tied and labeled. One misstep could allow dust or moisture inside, and the scrolls would begin to deteriorate almost immediately. His movements are deliberate, each gesture a reflection of years of training and the unspoken understanding that these fragile texts carry immense value, far beyond their material form. Quirky as it sounds, some archivists tucked tiny charms or written blessings into storage areas. A small piece of papyrus might read, "May these words endure," or bear the symbol of Bes for protection. It seems almost humorous to imagine an invisible guardian of scrolls, but it is a subtle testament to the reverence and care invested in these objects. Historians still argue whether ancient Egyptian storage methods evolved primarily from practicality or ritualized belief.
Were thick walls and sealed jars purely protective, or did they carry symbolic significance as well? Likely both, as Egyptian society often intertwined the pragmatic with the sacred, turning even preservation into a quiet act of devotion.
You follow the senior curator to a set of long scrolls intended for temple libraries. They are carefully unrolled just enough to check for cracks or splits, then rolled back with precision and tied in linen cords. You notice the subtle variations. Some fibers are supple, some stiffen slightly by age, each requiring its own gentle approach. Handling them is like conversing with a living entity, feeling its response, understanding its temperament. Nearby, a group of scribes catalogs incoming scrolls, noting author, content, and date in a master ledger. Red ink highlights titles, while black ink details summaries. The system is elegant and efficient, ensuring that texts can be located without unnecessary handling. Even in a busy archive, there is calm, an almost meditative sense that every action preserves knowledge, not just physically, but conceptually. A small doodle of a crocodile tucked into the margin seems to wink at you. Even in this solemn space, traces of human humor persist. It reminds you that preservation is not only about material care, it is about maintaining the humanity within the text, the small personality of each scribe who touched it. The curator opens a particularly large scroll, detailing astronomical observations and celestial cycles. He runs his fingers gently along the papyrus, feeling each fiber and noting any irregularities in ink absorption. The scroll is rolled back, tied securely, and stored horizontally on a low rack to prevent sagging. The attention to detail is exhaustive, but necessary. Every line of text must remain readable, intact, and true to the original composition. A young apprentice quietly hums as he secures a jar of sacred hymns, a subtle rhythm guiding his movements. The sound is almost hypnotic, blending with the soft rustle of papyrus and the distant hum of the river. You realize that sound, like care, is part of the preservation ritual, a gentle accompaniment that keeps the work slow, deliberate, and thoughtful. You pause to observe a bundle of scrolls marked for distant temples. Each is wrapped in linen, tied with cord, and labeled clearly. The weight of responsibility is almost palpable. These scrolls carry sacred texts, official decrees, and records of human life across vast distances. The archivists handle them as though aware of the centuries to come, of the hands that will unroll them and the minds that will study them. Quirky details abound. Some archivists used subtle scent markers, crushed herbs, lightly rubbed along the linen wrap, to identify scrolls by smell in dimly lit storage. It seems almost whimsical, but it was effective in distinguishing texts when lighting was scarce. Historians still debate how often scrolls were actually retrieved versus remaining in storage for decades or centuries. Some argue that many texts were preserved more for posterity than active use, serving as quiet witnesses to Egyptian civilization rather than daily tools. Whatever the case, the care invested ensured survival. The sun begins to sink, casting warm amber light across the storage hall. Shadows stretch along rows of scrolls, illuminating the fine texture of papyrus fibers and the careful precision of inked hieroglyphs. You take a deep breath, letting the quiet weight of centuries settle around you. Each scroll is more than material. It is a connection, a whisper, a memory frozen in time. You walk slowly among the racks, feeling the subtle differences between scrolls, imagining the hands that wrote, illustrated, annotated, and preserved them. There is a calm rhythm to this work, a quiet meditation on continuity, patience, and the human desire to make thoughts endure. Even the smallest or most mundane texts carry significance. A ledger, a letter, a poem.
They all contribute to the fabric of civilization. As night falls, lanterns are lit, casting a soft glow across the storage hall. The air grows cooler, the scent of papyrus and resin deepening in richness. Scrolls rest quietly in their racks, jars, and bundles, ready for the generations yet to come. You step outside, listening to the gentle rustle of reeds and the distant murmur of the Nile. The world feels slower here, deliberate and enduring, a tangible reminder that even fragile materials can preserve human thought across millennia.
And as the stars begin to sparkle overhead, you realize that the life of a scroll is more than words on papyrus. It is a slow, patient journey, guided by hands and minds devoted to care, reverence, and continuity. The scrolls endure, silent yet alive, ready to whisper their stories to those who will listen. The night is quiet, and the Nile flows with gentle persistence, reflecting the pale shimmer of the moon. You wander along the riverbank, feeling the cool dampness of the sand beneath your feet. Tonight, your focus is on the final moments of a scroll's journey, the quiet reflection, the legacy, and the soft settling of knowledge into time itself. Here, in this liminal space between creation and preservation, you grasp the full scope of what papyrus represents, the enduring dialogue between humans and their world. You step into a dimly lit room where scrolls are laid out on low tables, their edges curling gently in the still air. The scent of dried papyrus and faint resin lingers, calming and earthy. A senior scribe carefully inspects each scroll, running his fingers along the delicate fibers, checking for cracks or warping. "A scroll is fragile," he murmurs, "but it carries the heartbeat of its author." You feel the weight of his words and realize that each scroll is a vessel not just of information, but of life, thought, and intention. Papyrus, having been used in Egypt for over 3 millennia, was not only a medium for writing, but also a symbol of civilization itself. Its production, from harvesting reeds along the Nile to rolling and transporting finished scrolls, represented a complex intersection of agriculture, art, and commerce. Without papyrus, the administrative, religious, and literary achievements of ancient Egypt would be far less accessible to us today. You watch an apprentice handle a bundle of scrolls destined for distant temples. He lifts each one gently, feeling the fibers, noting the subtle differences in texture and flexibility. Some scrolls are supple and smooth, others stiff and slightly roughened by drying. The motions are slow, deliberate, an unspoken conversation between human hands and the papyrus itself. Quirky as it may seem, scribes sometimes placed tiny protective charms or inscriptions between scrolls in storage jars. Small depictions of deities, miniature prayers, or abstract symbols were intended to safeguard the knowledge inside. While they might appear whimsical to a modern observer, these measures reflect a blend of practicality, superstition, and reverence. The ancients seemed to understand instinctively that knowledge, like life, benefits from guardianship. Historians still debate the precise effectiveness of such methods, but there is no question that papyrus survived centuries thanks to careful handling, environmental awareness, and layered preservation strategies. Even the most casual act of rolling a scroll incorrectly could lead to long-term damage, making the thoughtful rituals of storage and transport essential. You move through the room, observing scrolls sorted by subject and significance, legal documents in one corner, medical and astronomical texts in another, literary and poetic works in a third. Each scroll is individually wrapped, tied with linen cords, and labeled in red ink. There is a rhythm to the process, a quiet choreography that emphasizes patience over speed. Every movement matters. A small bundle catches your eye. Its edges curl slightly, but the ink remains vivid, the lines of hieroglyphs crisp and deliberate. You gently lift it, imagining the scribe who wrote it centuries ago. The careful selection of reeds, the precise alignment of fibers, the slow, deliberate strokes of ink that formed words and ideas. This single scroll represents hours of labor, devotion, and thought, now resting quietly in your hands.
You notice the ambient sound of papyrus as it moves, the soft creak of wooden racks, the faint hum of the river outside. Even in silence, there is life here, the subtle pulse of preserved knowledge patiently enduring. You realize that the survival of these scrolls depends not only on careful materials and techniques, but also on the mindfulness and reverence of every person who touches them.
The senior scribe opens a long ceremonial scroll, unrolling it just enough to examine the illustrations and text. The colors remain muted but distinct, and the hieroglyphs retain the elegance of their original execution. He points out small margin notes, faint annotations, and occasional hidden doodles, all evidence of the scribe's human presence. You recognize a pattern. Even in sacred texts, humanity leaves its subtle fingerprints, proof that care and devotion coexist with creativity and playfulness. You continue to move through the repository, reflecting on the journey of each scroll. From the harvest of reeds along the Nile, to the delicate labor of creation, to the painstaking processes of storage, cataloging, and transport, papyrus represents an extraordinary convergence of skill, patience, and thought. Each scroll is a bridge across time, connecting authors, scribes, and readers in an unbroken chain of curiosity and care. The light dims further, casting a soft glow across the room. You pause to touch a scroll that contains hymns to the goddess Isis. Its edges are slightly roughened, but the fibers remain intact, resilient under careful handling. You can almost feel the presence of generations. The scribe who wrote it, the archivist who stored it, the trader who transported it, and now yourself. It is a living thread, weaving together centuries of human attention and thought.
In some ancient repositories, scribes and archivists reportedly whispered small prayers or blessings over scrolls, asking for their longevity and protection. You smile softly, imagining these invisible rituals, small acts of hope and care that contributed to the survival of knowledge. Even if they were symbolic, the intention underscores the reverence Egyptians had for written words.
As the night deepens, the repository grows quiet. Scrolls rest in their jars, bundles, and racks. You sit on a nearby mat, letting the weight of the centuries settle around you. The room is calm, meditative, and gentle. You notice the faint shimmer of ink under the lantern light, the subtle texture of papyrus fibers, and the quiet harmony of preserved knowledge. Every scroll here has a story, not just in its content, but in the care that has allowed it to survive. Now, slow your breathing, and let the atmosphere of reverent patience wash over you. The soft rustle of papyrus, the faint hum of the river, and the subtle play of shadow and light create a perfect lullaby of history. The legacy of these scrolls is quiet but profound. They remind you that even fragile materials, treated with care and patience, can carry the thoughts of humans across millennia.
And as you finally rise and step toward the window, you look out at the moonlit Nile, its surface calm, reflecting the soft glow of distant lamps. You feel a gentle sense of closure and continuity. The journey of the papyrus is complete, from reed to scroll to archive, each stage imbued with care, devotion, and mindfulness. You understand now that the endurance of knowledge depends as much on the slow, deliberate acts of humans as on the materials themselves. Take a deep breath. Let your shoulders relax, your eyes soften, and your mind float gently along the river of time. The scrolls, resting quietly, are safe for now, tucked in their jars and bundles, each a small echo of lives long past. The words within them are patient. They do not demand attention, yet they endure, quietly whispering lessons, stories, and memories to anyone who cares to listen. Feel the texture of the papyrus beneath your fingers, even if only in imagination. The subtle grain, the tension of the fibers, the faint imprint of ink. Sense the deliberate rhythm of hands rolling, tying, cataloging, and storing scrolls. There is a calm magic in this, a human devotion that spans centuries, preserving thought and care in silent, tangible form. Let the gentle hum of the Nile accompany your breath. Let the faint rustle of reeds, the soft glow of lanterns, and the quiet patience of the scribes guide you into a slower rhythm. These scrolls have witnessed the rise and fall of generations, yet here they remain, resilient and enduring, just as your own thoughts and dreams will endure in the gentle cycles of the night. Now dim the lights, feel the comfort of your surroundings, and allow the calm, steady pulse of history to lull you toward rest. Every scroll is a bridge across time, and in this moment, you are a part of that continuum, quietly connected to the care, patience, and creativity of countless hands before you. Sleep, knowing that knowledge endures, quietly, softly, like the river's flow. End of script. Sweet dreams.